Welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart, here today to talk about sales and communication. Just yesterday in the Portland market, it was registered 0.8 months of inventory. Like never before, are we needing to be good at sales and good at communication? I have just the guest today who's going to teach us all about that. Before I do that, I want to remind you that inside of the Think Bigger Real Estate group on Facebook, you'll get snippets, the very best snippets of these shows where you can come in and not only digest them easily, but interact with others that are working to apply these things. So again, if you're not yet a member of the Think Bigger Real Estate group on Facebook, do so now. And today's guest, his name's Bill Kurzeja. He's out of the San Diego market. For any of you that are jealous of his weather, I am as well. And Bill, let's talk a little bit about sales and communication. But first, tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get into this? What's your background? Teach us about Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Justin. This is great to be here. So my background, I started out, like all of us, undecided on where I was going to head. Coming out of high school, tried college. College was good. Went to Penn State for a little while. Found my way into the military. Military really taught me a lot about discipline and process. And growing up, I was pretty shy into myself. I communicated right with my inner circle, but stepping out of that comfort zone was pretty frightening to me, which a lot of us go through in our adolescent years. And the military took me out of that shell, right? And taught me how important it is not only to have a clear and defined process, but to communicate that to the people around you, right? A lot of our training was moving without speaking, things like that. So you have to learn how to communicate very clearly so everybody understands where you're going and what's happening. Transition from the military after about 8 years into the retail sales industry. And I applied much of the process and techniques that I learned in the military, and the communication part of it came very natural at that point in my life. And I seen myself moving pretty quickly through the process and up the ladder as far as in the retail industry and sales and finding success at it. But it wasn't until later that I learned, looking back, what caused that success. And that was really having that clear, defined communication and having confidence to be able to communicate, which is overlooked, right? We don't think of confidence when it comes to communication sometimes, but really understanding and knowing how to communicate creates that confidence. So I started my own business, and here we are over 5-6 years later. With many clients, real estate clients down here. We're challenged with our market down here as well in San Diego as far as no inventory. My wife and I are actually looking for a home, and she's frustrated because there aren't any. So, it's pretty unique time, and it's really good to be able to separate yourself.
It's interesting, this concept of communication, and I absolutely do not want this to go political. In no way am I trying to send it that way, but I'm going to give a reference. You think about what's happened here over the past week, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, is that the most powerful move to silence the commander-in-chief, right?
Right.
Like, the communication was stopped. And it's interesting how powerful of a move that was, whether you love it or whether you hate it. Yep. The point is that when communication stops, like, much of one's power is taken away. The ability to communicate your message to your audience is more critical than ever before, right? When we're living in a knowledge economy. And again, I really don't care what side of the aisle you're on this. That's not the purpose of this show. The show is to help you think bigger, not dislike people more. But the point, that I want to say is just to re-emphasize how critical it is to learn how to communicate, right? And to learn how to get your communication channels open and have people actually receive the message that you're giving. Because if that's gone, most of your ability to persuade and lead is also gone, right? And serve is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that's taught to us, right? We're brought up through school and middle school and high school with the idea that we know how to communicate because you learn how to talk and things like that. But do we properly know how to communicate? Do we understand what empathy is and what clarity is and what listening? All these different pillars of proper communication that are not taught to us. We're taught how to read and write and math and science, but if you don't know how to communicate, then you don't understand what the other person, you don't know how to receive it as well as give it. And that's why it's so important, especially in the industry that we're in, to have that clear, defined communication. I hear salespeople so many times blame the consumer, right? Oh, they're just looking, they're not ready. They couldn't find anything that they were looking for. Well, maybe you weren't asking the right questions. Do you ever look in the mirror and say, okay, did I communicate properly? And what does that mean? And if you can do that and you can learn how to do that properly, you'll be very successful.
It's funny you say that. So I've got a funny story here. My mom, who built a very, very successful business with virtually no college education. She said, when I was in middle school, high school, I would always get in trouble for going and talking in the hallway. She said I was really good at it. And she said all my teachers would always tell me, hey, you've got to get in here and learn or you're not going to have a future. And she said, I attribute everything that I've built to my ability to learn how to communicate, how to talk in the hallway.
That's so funny.
So I think all of us can, and I'm not talking about like the water cooler talk, but actually conveying a message that moves people, right, to a different and better place. What do you see, Bill? I know you coach and work with, all kinds of different industries. One in particular is the real estate industry. What do you feel like is one of the biggest missing skills when it comes to communication and sales, that if real estate agents were to have this and master this, they would have more business and better business?
Listening. There really isn't a bigger part of communicating than the listening part, because you need to be able to hear what they're saying. And sometimes listening is not just the words, just what are their features, how are they moving. Everybody focuses on communication as either a verbal or written thing, when we communicate more with our body language than anything else. Where 93% of our communication is nonverbal. So it's the tone of your voice, and it's how you interact with your eyes, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to practice that listening part and really understand, because then if you really hear the message that they're trying to convey to you, because sometimes they don't even realize it, you can convert that into what the features and benefits are and which option to direct them. A lot of times the customer's in the market, right? Nobody goes to a real estate agent and says, you know what, I'm thinking about buying a home, if they're really not in that phase of purchasing, right? So our jobs is to take them from that thinking part to move them into the purchasing part, right? And how do we do that? We have to hear what their features and benefits and then apply that to that. And once you match that consumer with the product, the house, or whatever it is that they're looking at, that's where it's an emotional thing. That's where the home run comes in. Then they want to get it no matter what. And your job is just to facilitate it at that point.
I think oftentimes listening is seen as a very passive activity.
Yep.
Right? I'm going to sit here and listen. Just sit and listen, right? Almost as if sitting and listening are the same things, the same kind of in the same like passive category. Whereas what I hear you saying, Bill, is that listening is actually very active.
Yeah.
That although you're maybe not talking, there's more to it than just sitting there listening, right?
Absolutely. You have to apply it.
What are some skills that you feel like help people to be a better listener?
Just really that being in the moment, right? So we live in a society where there's so much distraction, right? There's your cell phones, your smartwatches, whatever. There's so many things beeping and vibrating and taking our attention away. One of the things you could do is silence everything. So when you're with your client, notepad and pen, sit down across from them, next to them, wherever you are, whatever the situation is, obviously in our current world, and then take your notes, write it down, jot it down, because listening, you're hearing with your ears. Now, when you're writing it, you're putting it into memory, right? So you're doing multiple acts that will resonate and really, make you understand what that consumer, what your client is looking for. Right. And sometimes sitting there and doing that helps the client figure out what they're looking for. And that's the whole goal. Right. So it's really get rid of the distractions, and that's going to help you listen that much better.
I find it very interesting. I was actually in a meeting just last night, and at a very critical time in the meeting, the person sitting next to me reached down and started looking at their phone. And it became very slightly uncomfortable for me because I was like, hey, this is like a critical point in conversation here. And all of a sudden they're looking at their phone, and I realized like their phone had been buzzing and I think they were late for the next appointment. And it was like, I get it. They need to communicate with that next client, or that next, appointment or whatever, that they
Right.
were going to be running a little bit late. I could sense that's what was going on. But it definitely distracted, and even kind of made that person that was talking at that moment,
Yep.
they noticed it as well. And I think you just feel a little bit smaller, a little less important, a little less listened to. And your power, I think, to persuade that person and move them in the direction you want them to diminishes when they feel like they're not as important as whoever is messaging you. Right. I mean, that was just a real life experience just recently. And it was interesting because I'm so guilty of that. I try really hard during appointments. My phone's away from me, but I'll do it with my family, right? Like, oh, my watch just went, oh wait, what's going on here? Oh, just like you said. And I can't imagine a more important group of people that I want to persuade and influence and impact than my family. And if they really don't think that they're number one, that's a problem, right? For all kinds of reasons.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you're absolutely correct. Our goal, especially in this industry, right? There are so many real estate agents. It's tremendous amount down here in San Diego for such a small inventory, and I'm sure you guys have the same where you're at. And how do you separate yourself from your competition, right? Everybody wants to go, how do I win in this? Oh, I take a smaller percentage. Well, no, cheaper is not better. People are not looking for cheaper. They're looking for value. We have just seen over the past year such an enormous increase in pricing, and people are paying it, right? And everybody's going, wow, they're just paying these numbers. It's crazy. Well, that's because the market's low and so on and so forth. But really, if you think about it, someone's not going to spend any money with anyone if they don't feel that there's a value there. Yeah. And that's important, right? Because we're the product. It's our jobs to separate ourselves. And how do you do that? You make that person feel like they're number one. And that's by listening.
Yeah. I'd love to have anybody that's listening here this morning. I know we got a few people tuning in here live. If you're listening to this later, feel free to kind of chime in as well. I'll follow back on comments. But what's been your greatest benefit or the greatest skill that's helped you be a great listener and great in kind of sales environments? I'd love to hear just like one thing that's really helped you. Please put that down. It'd be fun to have everybody kind of chiming in and sharing best practices. Bill, when it comes to sales, right? We've talked a lot about communication, about listening. How critical is that? What are some of the key kind of sales skills? And I think it's hard to sometimes separate those because communication really is so deeply intertwined within sales. But what do you see? Like, where do you see a lot of people going wrong when it comes to sales?
Not understanding the process part of it, right? So there's always this steps involved, okay? Whether it's paperwork, whether it's getting the offer correct, so on and so forth. So practice that, right? So I'm big into sports. And if I want to perform well at a particular sport, I'm going to go practice at it. But we don't apply that same mentality to our work, right? So, you don't want to have to look for paperwork. You don't want to have to ask questions when the client is there in front of you. You should be prepared well ahead of time. So, practice all the paperwork for each individual type of deal. Study it, learn it, memorize it, so that when it comes to you sitting with your client and getting things together for them, you get it together quickly, and they look at you as an expert at that point. Because, wow, look at this. He's squared away. He's got everything that we need. No hesitation, no questions, things like that. So it's really understanding what it is, the process, what you're selling, and what goes into that, other than just earning their trust.
But I love how you said that, Bill, and it really kind of lends itself to your military background, right? Where there is a process for everything. Like, it's so important, like literally life or death, for people to follow very specific processes. And it's interesting how, one way that I've kind of seen this play out, and you've totally sparked kind of a reminder of this, is that when people are buying from you, they're buying your confidence to solve their problems. And if you're not in a flow as far as, like you said, the paperwork, where's the paperwork at, or what happens next, your mind is doing this, and your confidence level that you're exuding drops because you're not able to really be in the moment. You're thinking about, okay, what's next? And then what do I do? And whether or not that's because you're not confident, it comes off as such, right? Yep. And it diminishes your ability, I think, to persuade people because your mind's over here, as opposed to like full on eye contact, exuding this confidence that you're safe with me. I'll take care of you. I'll help you get what you want and what you need. And I love that, because the process is oftentimes overlooked, especially salespeople tend to be kind of like, a little bit of maverick, like we're just kind of like fly by seat of our pants a little bit. We're pretty good with our tongue, right? We can speak pretty well, communicate decent, and our charisma kind of like compensates for some of our lack of organization and our lack of the detail.
Absolutely.
Kind of what I hear you saying is that this process is critical to allow you to really be your best self in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke about it because, okay, the customer said yes. Now what? And we kind of go, oh, now I got to do this. And you see, depending on the industry, you see salespeople running around in circles. I have to get this together. Well, our energy is felt by everyone around us. So, if you are confident, you understand what the next steps are, then you're going to be just nice, easy going, cool. And they're going to stay nice, easy going, cool. Remember, we do this all the time. They do, especially purchasing a home. Not many people buy a lot of property, right? So this might be the only time they ever buy a house. So they have absolutely no clue what the steps are. You're the expert. I call salespeople the doctor of whatever industry they're in. We go to a doctor's office. They have a lab coat on. We 100% trust everything they tell us, right? Why not be the doctor of your industry? Be the expert, right? Have that consumer feel like, you know what? I feel safe. And then you're going to win when someone feels safe.
Yeah, I love that. Bill, let's talk a little bit about how people get in contact with you. I'm going to put up here in the comments here, professionalsuccessself.com.
Yep.
If you're watching this, you want to learn more about what Bill has to offer, how he helps people, please go to his website. Again, professionalsuccessself.com. And if you can find Bill there. Bill, I want to move now to the signature question of the show. You're a big thinker. You help other people succeed in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. What do you do? What does Bill do? Bill Kurzeja do to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your personal possibilities? What does it look like for you?
I focus on details. I write a lot, so I always have notepads around, and writing isn't mean that it's clean, neat. It's just ideas, right? When you think of it, write it, or I put it on my cell phone. So that helps me because, a lot of times these things pop in our heads. I like to run. It happens when I'm running. Usually I get a lot of clarity and things come to mind. So just taking the notes is very important to me. And then I always, walk in the shoes of the consumer, right? So no matter what the product is, I go out there and I follow that journey, right? Because what are they experiencing and how do I make that experience better from the other side, right? A lot of times we're always wrapped in our world, and we're, again, this customer's buying maybe one house their whole life, and you're going to sell, 15, 30, whatever it is a year. So, remember what it is to not know what's happening. So always take the customer journey.
I love that concept. Just like you said, I'll oftentimes get ideas and I'm like, oh, wow, that would work really well. And then, within a few minutes, it's like, whew, gone into the ether, right?
Yeah. There's another one, right?
Yeah. Back to that process, right? And I think, again, for any that are listening to this, that are like, I think I got this sales thing. I'm pretty good. I can talk pretty well. That's actually not where you're losing, right? It's in the process. It's in the details, the stuff that's not your forte, that's actually taking you out of your element, taking you out of your brilliant spot, keeping you from being who you can otherwise be. When right now in this economy, it's required for you to be your best. Like it's not just a nicety, it's a necessity. So Bill, I want to thank you so much for your time today on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. Again, if you're looking to connect with Bill, learn more about him and how he can help you get a bigger piece of the shrinking pie called real estate inventory, reach out to him at professionalsuccessself.com. Bill, been such a pleasure. Thank you again. I want to remind everybody that my charge and mantra and passion really is to help you go think bigger. So let's do that this week. Thanks so much, Bill. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.